Welcome back, everybody, to the Abbey Normals, where we cover the supernatural, paranormal, and everything strange. I am one of your hosts, Alex.
And I am Mark.
And today we're going to be covering mummies. We got a lot to cover, so we're just going to hop right into it with the history of mummies.
Just a quick preface, guys. I have like a little bit of an allergy cold going on, so if you hear me grunting throughout this, I'm not doing strenuous labor. I am just my body is trying to kill me from the inside.
Okay. So, getting into the history of mummies. First off, Ro, our other co-host, she and myself kind of tag team this topic, this part of this topic, and I'll kind of go back and forth to what we found and what she found and all of that. So, basically, mummy comes. First off, one of the biggest things that Ro and I both found that I don't think we realized is that you can find mummies on almost every continent, besides like Antarctica. A lot of a lot of different tribes, or however you want to put it, areas, people, whatever. Actually practice mummification. We always look at mummification as like just in Egypt, but they're all over. In fact, Ro in her research found, and I didn't realize that they classify this person as a mummy. But Saint Francis Xavier in India, where he's buried,
Really?
or not buried, but he's not buried, but he's on display. Like he's mummified, and he still looks like he would, today. He still looks normal, and all of that. And I guess they show his body every 10 years, and it's supposed to have, some people say he has healing properties and all of that. Like he gets put on display every 10 years, and he's a mummified saint.
I'm not gonna lie. Like, I honestly, before doing like some of the research and everything like that, I thought it was an Egyptian thing, and it was only there.
Yeah, like it's amazing kind of what it's Egyptian society is what everybody looks at, and I think it's because once again, this is one of those things that Ro was talking about, is that, and I agree with her, is when we think of mummies, we think of this person that's just wrapped in bandages that are white, like perfectly clean bandages. And then when they're walking, or you see them, it's they're making that sound, and has their hands out like they're like sleepwalking towards something. I always thought this personally. Like I always thought, like, people make zombies dumb. I always thought the mummies were the dumbest ones, because all they did was I mean, really think about it. Like all they did was, all you would see in games and in movies is that these mummies would just like be like and walking in a straight line at you very slowly.
Unless you watch the actual movie The Mummy with Brendan Fraser, and like how they're crawling on like the buildings and everything like that. I think that movie took a whole different aspect of it, but
Yeah, no. And I think it's interesting too, because like you were saying, most people equate mummies to being Egyptian, but I mean, the Spanish found so many Incan mummies, because mummification in Incan and Peruvian ancient cultures was a prevalent thing, and a prevalent part of their culture as itself, as we're learning even now to this day.
Well, I think the other thing too that people don't realize is that where we find a lot of mummies, look at the climate. It actually is pretty good for preservation of a body that would pass on. Like the humidity or non-humidity or whatever like that, like affects the process of decay. So not only did Egyptians have certain ways of doing things, but other the types of people had different processes for mummification. And if you look at it, like it's around that dry, sandy areas that, natural mummy, per se, they call it natural mummy, can be created where, decaying doesn't necessarily take place. Though this is the other thing that I found too, is that and this is basically just off the Egyptian, because this is what is probably the most documented that I was able to find. And I'm actually I found this on historyofthenet.com, so just a reference to if you want to look at it. It's the actual process that it took to mummify a body in Egypt. So it took around 70 days for the actual mummification process to take place. Like, that's how long it took.
70 days?
70 days.
Holy cow. Now, did they say it took like 70 consecutive days, or was this like broken up?
Well, they said it took around 70 days. So it could be less, it could be more. So I actually have a list. There was about 11 steps.
Let's hear them. I got to hear them.
Yeah. So the first one, some of these are really, they're a little stomach turning. Okay. So the first one is the body is washed. Okay. So obviously the body is washed. So that's, yep. I think, yeah. Number 2, a cut is made on the left side of the abdomen and the internal organs. So the intestines, liver, lungs, stomach were removed. Okay. Now remember, this is according to Egyptian. So this is not this is just the Egyptian way of doing it. Okay. So once again, cut is made on the left side of the abdomen. Intestines, liver, lungs, stomach were removed. The heart, where the ancient Egyptians believed to be the center of emotion and intelligence, was left in the body for use in the next life, which I find interesting. Mm-hmm. That they left the heart in. Like that back then, so like with no thought process of anatomy and what it actually does, that they felt that this thing that beats in the top left corner of your body is, the heart, and then that's the center for emotions and of intelligence, and that's what we still use today, as the thought process of, oh, it's our heart, this person has our heart.
Oh yeah.
Number 3, a hooked instrument is used, and it goes up the nose, okay, and it would pull the brain out. Like they would turn it, and it had a little hook, and it would pull the brain out. The brain was considered to be important, was not considered to be important, and was thrown away. Yes.
We don't need this. We're just going to scoop it out and slurry it up real quick and get it out.
Pull it through the nose. So imagine them pulling the brain through the nose.
Maybe that's why they're depicted as being dumb in movies, because they don't have a brain.
Could be.
Old scarecrow theory from Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Yeah. Correct. So that's only step 3.
we got 8 more steps to go, people.
Yeah. So the 4th step then is and this is where it looks like this would be the most time. The body and internal organs were packed with natron salt. I don't know what natron salt is. So natron salt. For 40 days, and then to remove all the moisture out of the body and the organs.
Okay.
Number 5, the dried organs were wrapped in linen and placed in canopic jars. I think I'm saying that right. Canopic jars. The lid of each jar was shaped to represent one of Horus's 4 sons. So what is it? You had Horus, and I can't remember the other one, but those were like the 2 main gods in Egypt. God, I can't remember the other one. But I know
Osiris.
Is it Osiris?
Osiris, I believe, is one of the major deities. But however, I am not a thorough Egyptologist.
Yeah.
I just know the big ones like Ra, Set, Horus, Osiris. I believe Osiris is this father.
And I thought there was only 2. Once again, we're not experts in this. I thought there was 2 like main deities, and then there was other ones below that. But whatever.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah. So the body was cleaned, or I'm sorry. So put in jars, and the lid was shaped in horses, to represent one of Horse's 4 sons. The body was cleaned, and the dried skin rubbed with oil. The
Is
body was
this
packed with. I'm sorry.
is that step 5?
That was step 6.
Oh, okay. Step 6. All right.
Okay. The body was wrapped with sawdust. So this is step 7. The body is wrapped with sawdust and rags, and the open cut sealed with wax. Okay. The body that is wrapped in linen bandages, about 20 layers were used, and it took 15 to 20 days to do that.
Holy cow. 20 layers? I mean, maybe it's not that thick.
Could be. You never know.
Yeah.
Uh, and then the death mask was placed over the bandages. So remember, like these masks were made. So the death mask was made and put over the bandages, and then the bandaged body was placed in a shroud or a large sheet cloth, which was then secured with linen strips. And then the last step is that the body is placed in the decorative mummy case or coffin, or whatever, what they call that. Yeah, the
Sarcophagus?
that's it. I couldn't think of it. So once again, Roe brought up too, it's like, then we look at it. So now we look at what we've actually found, and then you have the pyramids, and the pyramids were, and some, this is the other thing too, is like a lot of people think that like every pharaoh had a pyramid. Not every pharaoh had a pyramid. Like some were just placed into like different areas. It was, some of the bigger pyramids are for some of the other, ones that were built. But I think one of the most famous, once again, Roe brought this one up too, is Tutankhamun, or also King Tut. Which, I mean, if you look at his sarcophagus and you look at his death mask, I mean, it's one of the most beautiful ones you'll ever see. I mean, it's all gold and all of that. I mean, this was the kid that took, was pharaoh at, they're saying 8 or 9 years old.
He's
Yeah.
No, because King Tut was. It's crazy because with all the medical studies that we do today, we find that he was like really sick and weakly. He
Hmm.
was, they think, physically deformed, had neurological issues, and that most importantly, he was probably just a seat on the throne for someone who was definitely manipulating him.
Yeah. Well,
what
they say he was deformed because he supposedly broke his leg at some point, and it just, obviously, you break a leg, they don't know how to heal it. They and all that.
wasn't
So
wasn't part of the issue too is like back in the day it was like you kept the bloodline pure by like keeping
Yeah,
it in the family per
yeah, no,
oh
se.
yeah, yeah,
Cleopatra came
incestual or
from.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Cleopatra came from 11 generations of brother-sister marriage.
Yes. So like I feel like that could have been part of the deformity issue
Well,
or
too,
part of it.
I like the Egyptians are crazy to me because like they say his break was really bad because it was, they almost believe compound fracture bad because of the way that it healed. The Egyptians did have some type of medical understanding. Like beer was a huge deal for the Egyptians back then. They would
Hmm.
brew beer from the wheat in the fields. And ironically enough, though, they didn't know this at the time, but the beer that they were brewing actually had kind of a strain of amoxicillin.
Hmm.
That was the bacteria that was eating the yeast from the wheat that they would ferment
Hmm.
it with. And they know that there was like hieroglyphic evidence showing that the Egyptians would be like, oh, you have like this cold, or you have this sniffle, or you have this like cough. You have to drink beer 3 times a day because the amoxicillin in the beer would actually help people get better. So they would prescribe them like 3 servings of beer per day, and they'd be like, "You have to do this for like 2 weeks." I don't know the exact time, but they'd be like, "You got to drink this beer for like 2 weeks," and then the people would get better. And I know when they were building the pyramids, the people actually building the pyramids got paid in beer. Like the Egyptians were crazy about beer, apparently.
Hmm.
Side fun fact for everybody for the day. Hot take.
One of the other things too, that Ro brought up, was the curses that they put out
Mm,
in front.
I,
So
yep.
so because obviously it's a sacred area, and which we can get into if we ever do more of curses and all of that. But Howard Carter, who actually found Tutankhamun, um, you know, basically the curse was anybody emphasizing an early death of someone who enters the tomb, and there was a lot of I think he died because of a mosquito bite or
Howard?
something like that. Yeah.
No, Howard died from Hodgkin's disease, which is pretty much Hodgkin's lymphoma in 1839.
Oh, okay. There was somebody in that I
I believe
read.
one of the workers
Yeah,
died from like a mosquito bite from and they probably, ironically enough, got West Nile virus or something along those
Yeah.
lines.
probably,
Yeah, yeah.
probably. This is I found a little bit, and then we get back to the actual, talking about mummies. But so a lot of when they would build these tombs or whatever, they would bring things that they thought they would need in the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so in Tutankhamun's, there was over 5,000 different items found. And that's, yeah,
5,000.
1,000. So, and that was thrones, archery, bows, trumpets, lotus chalice, they said a gold toe stalls. I don't know what they are. They looked like golden fingernails or golden fingers that they just made. uh, Furniture, food, wine, sandals, underwear. They said that what is it? There was a dagger that was found that supposedly was made out of meteorite. So yeah, I mean, it's just and once again, we're getting a lot of this stuff just to our listeners. This is all from Google searches and all of that. So if we are incorrect, I apologize that we are incorrect. I did pull some information from Wikipedia. I did reference where we got that other the list of the process. So, like I said, if we're wrong, then we're wrong, and please, leave us comments and say, hey, I read this or whatever, and definitely something we would research. So,
Now, I do remember too reading or hearing something that if you had servants too, you would get mummified.
yeah,
So if you were a pharaoh, you were dying, whatever, and you were a servant, hey, it looks like your day is coming soon too. How would you feel if that happened to you? Oh crap, he's dying. I'm gonna do you I don't know the whole process, but did they kill their servants then too? Do you think?
I'm not sure about that, but I mean, if you look at it from the perspective of someone who's a low-born person who adamantly believes in the religion of the culture that you're within and the belief system that you attribute to, you would probably think of it as a great honor. Vikings would oftentimes ask their slaves or their servants if, when the Jarl died or their, master, the proper vernacular, or however you want to call it, would die, they would say, hey, do you want to escort your, owner or person to Valhalla with them when they go away? And, you were given the opportunity to be like, yeah, sure, why not? And they would, they'd kill you and you would go off on the boat with them and they would burn the boat with you on there. I mean, if this is what you believe and this is the
Yeah.
belief that you have, I'm sure you'd be like, well, I'm definitely going to heaven with a pharaoh, and the pharaoh's basically divined from the gods themselves to rule over Earth, so they're definitely going to the good place. I kind of want to go to the good place too.
That makes sense. So, when you put it like that, then yes, I could see someone being excited for it. But what do you think there was anyone who was like, I'm just a servant to try to get by, I don't
Well,
believe in all
well, when we look at that, I'm sorry, I was waiting to bring this up because you have the Peruvian children mummies that are
Mhm.
500-600 years old, and they're finding that all of these children, like one of them, the maiden, who is one of the most prominent ones, she was found with actually cocoa leaves lumped into her mouth. So basically, they drugged all of these children with alcohol, cocoa leaves to make them more submissive and more passive. So I think that kind of boils down to, even though you may believe adamantly in all of this system,
Mhm.
I think it's a human animal brain survival instinct where you don't want to die. Like
Yeah.
you may fight back, and they're seeing that these children were super drugged because they may have fought back, or it may have just made the passage of death with them in like a twilight state easier for them. They
Yeah, that
don't.
makes sense.
I mean, children would probably be terrified if they see someone coming at you with like a knife or something or a poisonous
Oh,
beverage,
yeah.
you know? So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think there says something that even though you believe in this and you want to go to the afterlife with, your pharaoh or whoever you're going with, you may not want to die either.
So speaking of that, been trying to find like I was just trying to do a quick Google search as you guys were talking to say, okay, what like qualified somebody to become mummified? So this is new. Supposedly there's mummification ranks within Egypt.
Hmm.
So the most perfect method, which was the one that we are all known, that we all know, and um, what we just described. So that's the most perfect method. Okay. And
Okay.
avoiding, so it didn't look like the practice. So let me take a step back. So it says the practice of preserving a body a body is believed to be quintessential feature for Egyptian life. Yet, even mummification has history and development was accessible to different ranks of society in different ways during different periods. There were at least three different processes of mummification, according to Herodotus, which was a Greek writer. I probably butchered that name. They range from the most perfect to the method employed by the poorest of classes. So I guess there really wasn't a what is it? There really wasn't like a ranking in Egypt, or there was a ranking in Egypt, but it didn't like you didn't have to be a pharaoh to become mummified. Like this was a normal practice. So, like I said, we won't go into there. So, the most perfect method is the top one. That seemed to be for the pharaohs.
Mhm.
Okay, the one that was called avoiding expense. So I'm just going to read this because
All right.
it's the best way is to do it. So
The budget
once
option
again,
for everybody.
yeah. What once again, this is from Wikipedia. So just look up mummy on Wikipedia. So avoiding expense. The second process describes was used by middle class people or people who wish to avoid expense. In this method, an oil derived of cedar trees was injected with a syringe into the abdomen. A rectal plug prevented the oil from escaping. The oil probably had a dual purpose of liquefying the internal organs and also of disinfecting the abdominal cavity. The body was then placed in natron for 70 days, which is the salt that I talked about. And in fact, we can click on that salt. The natron salt is actually um it's actually found in Chad. So that you would use that. At the end of this time, the body was removed, and the cedar oil, now containing the liquefied organs, was drained through the rectum. With the body dehydrated, could be returned to the family. Um, and then whatever burial things that they had, they would do, such as placed in a shaft tomb, which is obviously just a smaller tomb, and then poor people used coffins fashioned with terracotta. So, so that's the mid one. The last one, so this is like for the poorer of poor people. The third and least expensive method, the embalmers offered was to clear the intestines with an unnamed liquid injected as an enema. The body was then placed in natron for 70 days and returned to the family.
You know, the craziest thing about this is that I believe that's some of the things you described is how we do modern mortuary practices today. Because I know they put in a rectal plug, and I know they inject solutions to kind of like liquefy stuff to,
Mm-hmm.
you know, make the
Mm-hmm.
body look good and kind of preserve it. And I mean, the fact that they were doing this in Egypt thousands of years ago, to me, just boggles my mind the fact that people can still see our ancient ancestors as kind of these like backwards, like, hill people, like that had no understanding of how anything works today.
Hmm.
I also think it's interesting too, like how they discovered this stuff. Now this goes back to like anything really. Like if we're talking about like even like fruits and like vegetables and just like mushrooms on the ground, like someone had to like be like, all right, eat that. Listen, let me see if that's good. And
All
like
right, Bob,
the
it's
whole,
your turn.
what
The,
was that?
I said, okay, Bob, it's your turn.
well, think about it. Think about it. Who was the first person that looked at a cow and said, "I'm going to get under that and drink what comes out of there"?
I know, like that. I've thought about that too. Is like, who in their right mind was like, I'm gonna milk that and I'm gonna put it on my cereal and see if it tastes good. But like, someone did it, and now it's common practice. Like,
Is
who?
it bad? Is
Somebody
it
was like,
bad
I'm
that
gonna
the
put this
first
on
thing
my
that went
frosted flakes.
is it bad that the first thing that went through my head when you said that was, "Hey Greg, I have nipples. Can you milk me?"
Somebody was like,
So
yeah, Greg, let's try it out. Let's see what happens.
so oh god, that's such a great movie. Um and then the last part of bit of history, I know I talked upon different cultures. That was the word I couldn't think of for some reason. Different cultures. So this is just a snapshot of where mummies have been found around the United States, around the world. So in Africa, in Libya and South Africa, they found it obviously with Egypt also. Um, in Asia, so China, Iran, Siberia, the Philippines. In Europe, they found mummies on the Canary Islands, the Czech Republic, Denmark, Hungary, Italy. In North America, obviously Canada and Greenland. I don't know why Canada, but that's very interesting to me. In Mexico, Oceania, which is Australia, the Torres Strait, New Zealand, South America. Um, obviously, just different portions of South America. So it's literally almost on every
Continent.
every continent, almost every place in the world. We see some form of mummification.
I think
So
too, it's important to note that mummies are a crazy thing to me because you have people like in cultures who didn't even know that they were mummifying people when they were killing them. Like you have the
mhm.
bog people of, Europe where I bogs are one of those crazy environments to where people think that bogs are these like bacteria ridden like desolate places where, you're going to get crazy infections and all of this, which some of that is true, but also bogs are a crazy environment to create mummies themselves because when you throw a body into a bog, they would do this and people would dump them in bogs to get rid of them or to just be like, oh, whatever's there, we'll eat them. Bogs are incredibly anaerobic environments where there's not oxygen in the water at all. So you
Mm-hmm.
see these like the one of the most famous ones is that little girl I believe that they pulled out of a bog in it was either Scandinavian region or in England. I can't remember off the top of my head. I probably should have, but I wasn't even thinking this until we started talking about mummies. Was they pulled her out, and I mean they could tell she had blonde hair,
Yep.
and she was like 1,000 years old or something. She was ancient, and they slit her throat and they dumped her in there. They think as a sacrifice, and people were like leaving bodies and they weren't even thinking about the fact that 1,000 years later we would be finding these bodies in perfect condition going wow like look at this another one is Utsi who was found by hikers in the Alps, and it was a guy from the Bronze Age. He actually they could tell he had grass weaved clothing, he had a bronze axe with him, he had a knife with him, and they know how he died because the arrow was still sticking in his back.
Oh,
Mm.
that's crazy.
So somebody
Yeah.
shot him from behind and he was trying to get away and succumbed to the wound from the arrow. And
Yeah.
that caused a huge thing with like the Swiss and the Italian government because where in the Alps he was found was kind of on like the border between the two countries. And it caused this huge legal debate as to who got Utsi because I mean he you could still see the boots he was wearing. And he just
Yeah.
got froze up there. And then after, warming, this hiking couple just found him and they were like they thought he was a legitimate like dead person from like a year or two ago. And they were scared because like we just found a body, and then they came out and they're like, oh yeah, no, this guy's like 10,000 years old or something. Like, don't
So
worry, it's still what you do.
I have a little bit on that. So Ro, going back to Ro's research that she did mention that there is a mummy of a child that I forgot where she said that it was. So I'll have to re-listen to it, but that it's so well preserved that there's sometimes at different angles it looks like she still opens her eyes. So
Yes, I've heard of that.
yes. And then to go for the oldest mummy, okay?
All
So
right.
okay, so the oldest known naturally mummified human corpse, okay, was I'll give you this. It was found in South America, okay?
Oh, okay.
And guys, you guys got one guess. How old do you think it is?
Okay, well, I kind of cheated a little bit, and I was reading because the bog thing got me interested. So I just looked up a little bit about bogs, and I saw something that dated back as far as 24,000 years or 24,000 24 no 2,400 years. Jeez.
I'm gonna say if we go by the common theory of going through the Bering Passage into America, and they're finding evidence from like 25,000, 30,000 years
Mhm.
ago. To make it to South America, if I do some logistical math, I don't know this one, and I'm gonna say probably 10,000 years.
So Mark, you're saying 10,000. Alex, what are you saying?
I'm gonna say 3,000.
Alex is technically closer.
But it's still
Technically,
older because
but yeah.
It's still older, but it's he's technically closer. It's South America. It is known. It's only a severed head, so it's a natural mummified human corpse. But the only thing that they found is a severed head. Okay, and it's named Inca Sueva #4, and it's supposedly 6,000 years old.
Oh my gosh.
Mhm.
that's
That
an
is
old head.
crazy.
Yep.
Hey, here's my question: is that how do you find that? Like, and
Well,
A and B, there's more up there.
oh yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, but this is the one that's still in preservation that actually, you know, naturally found.
I think that's like I guess with just like the earth moving around, like the maybe like things moving, it just like it work its ways up to the surface. It's like a loose tooth, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I'm looking at Utsi was died in 3,230 BC
Wow.
in Austria and Italy. Sorry, not Swiss, but Austria, the Austrian Alps.
Now, if you think about that, you said when did they die?
This guy died 3,230 BC is about the estimate because they can estimate pretty close because he has some really good stuff on him.
So Uzi just is under because if you look at it, that means that's about 5,000 years old compared to the Severhead that's 6,000. Because remember, BC goes you go up in number, or you go down in number
Down in
till you get to
number,
zero, and then
yeah,
you go up in number after in AD.
yeah,
So if you take the 32, you go down 32, and then you're going up 2000, 2021. So obviously it's only about 5,000 years old. So a little over 5,000 years old.
yeah, he's over 5,000. But I mean, that's still, I mean, a severed head is still,
Yeah.
6,000 years old is still a huge deal.
Yep. So
O-
so that
Okay.
so that's the history.
All right. Okay. So, quick side note. Okay, now that we're taking guesses, I just looked up the oldest mummified animal. Take a guess on how old you think that is.
It's got to be at least 10,000. Has to be at least 10,000 because people were mummifying things for a long time.
Now this isn't like an intentional mummification. I think this is just like a hey, this animal was walking and it just fell into the right circumstances to get preserved for set amount of years.
Well, you're talking just like, well, there's those mammoths who were like, they found in Siberia who were like frozen.
Does that count as a mummy though?
Well, no, I actually want to bring that up too. So let's talk about this. But then I was going to talk about the unintentional modern, well, not unintentional, but the modern mummies that we have now. So
I'm gonna guess. I'm gonna guess about 9,000 years old.
I'm going to say 25,000. If those mammoths were around, I mean, mammoths didn't. when they stinked a long time ago, right?
Oh yeah, they did. So I got a 9,000 and a 25,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark, you're closer.
Wow.
50,000 years old, mummified caribou calf and a wolf pup. 50,000.
Wow.
That is crazy.
Like a children's book that went awry. A puppy and a calf on a journey.
It's like Ice Age.
Yeah, we just found Ice Age. Like, if there's like a walnut there, we know we found Ice Age. Okay,
All
so
right.
on top of that, what I was going to talk about is the modern mummies, and this has fascinated me since I first learned about it, and I think it's kind of crazy, and it's also morbidly terrifying. So we have Mount Everest, and I don't know if you guys know this, but there are actually trail markers, but they're human bodies. One of the
Mhm.
most famous trail markers is Green Boots, who's a hiker. Because the thing with Mount Everest is that it's basically they tell you if you start climbing and you get into distress and somebody's not going to make it, you're actually told to leave them.
Really?
Yeah, you're not
Yeah, I
supposed
heard
to
that.
stop to help them because you will die too.
Yep.
Because once you hit the oxygen range for like oxygen deprivation, you only have so much time before you can get up and get down. And if you miss that window, you basically die.
Oh, that'd be such a tough call. I mean, like that would suck.
Yes, and literally one of the biggest trail markers is Green Boots, and it's this hiker who died, and he's wearing green boots. And that once you reach Green Boots, you're 8,500 feet up the slope, and you have like about I think like 2 or 3 hours to get to the top because you see Green Boots, and he's on the northern trail of it. And the bodies are perfectly mummified. Like you can look up pictures of the hiking, and you see people's faces, they look alive because
Mhm.
they're frozen and they're, completely preserved. And they look alive. Like there's the sleeping beauty of Mount Everest where it's this woman who's, beautiful and you can perfectly see her face. I mean, it's
Yeah.
perfectly preserved and she looks like she's sleeping because she died while she was sleeping or she passed out while she was sleeping. And she's just laying there and you walk past her and you just kind of go, well, we're here, so we only have this far to go.
Yeah.
And to me, these are mummies. They litter Mount Everest, like tons of people, and they're finding more and more now with the melting of the glaciers on there.
Mhm.
They're finding more and more bodies that are older and older and older from like Sherpas and stuff that died going up there. And it's to me, it's this crazy thing that it's now we're using dead bodies as trail markers, and in a way, they've become modern mummies. Like Green Boots is famous, like world famous in the climbing community. If you climb mountains, you know who Green Boots is, and he is the trail marker on Mount Everest for you have a certain amount of time to go.
I think this is getting off subject, but like I think that would be one of the hard. That has to be one of the hardest things to do, not just because it's the highest mountain, but like it. You, if you were to climb up Mount Everest once, it's not going to be the same climbing it up again because the weather's not the same, and like things move and change and everything like that. So I think that like I just don't know why anyone would do that. I don't like that. It would be an accomplishment. Don't get me wrong, but that like you're playing with your life right there. Like that is,
Yeah, is it worth it?
I, I guess to
I can
some
tell you right
people.
now, at 38 years old, no.
Not on my to-do list.
No, not anywhere close on my to-do list.
I mean,
Ugh.
it's one of those crazy things that when we look at mummies and to get off the modern mummy, I guess, and I use that term very lightly. But when we look at mummification and we look at the cultural significance of it, because if we're gonna talk about mummies and how I think human beings we're still fascinated with them, and when we look at even in the past life, I mean, death was kind of the next step in your process on your belief system. Like everybody always said when in those days when you died, something else happened, and there was something better that happened, or something worse, and the cultural significance of mummification, to have your ancestors with you and to have them be a part of your life, and to, whatever cultural significance mummification has played, has also led to a very nasty term now, which is grave robbing. And
Mm,
when we look at the cultural significance of that, like when we take the mummies themselves, we're taking a part of someone's culture. Like, when Howard was there, or Carter was there, sorry, Howard Carter. He basically, if you were to look at it, he basically robbed Egypt of one of its most significant finds. And it's not the most significant, but I mean, it brought mummies to like this golden precipice of cultural items to be viewed. I mean, I remember I went to the Field Museum when I was a kid and saw King Tut and saw his sarcophagus and everything because they had it there. And they
Hmm.
had the big exhibit for it, and I mean, I saw it. It was, I mean, you can't describe unless you've seen it in person, and I don't think you can really see it in person anymore. I think they stopped doing that in the '90s. But, um, it's you can't describe it unless you've seen it. Like, the amount of work and the amount of effort and the amount of effigy that went into making this sarcophagus was, I mean, it had to be backbreaking. It had to be arduous. It was something that, people would just, if you had people who cared that much about you to make that, I mean, that's like the ultimate symbol of their dedication to who you were. And basically that was kind of raped and pillaged and taken from your home to be kind of put on display. And I don't think that was the original intention of the Egyptians when they did it.
and you bring
Yeah.
up another good point too, is like that the dedication, there was no power tools, there was no 3D printers, there was no like enter this into a computer. Like someone by hand made that, and then to like see that craftsmanship, like yeah, like that was insane. Like that, and granted, I've never seen it in person, but like I've seen other things that like back in the day, just like the amount of detail like people put into things or like that they did is just it's amazing.
Well, going back to Egypt, okay. Put in when you have a second, put in the Sphinx painted, or put in the Sphinx with color. The Sphinx originally had color, and it originally had a nose also, but still, like if you look it up, like, and this is all done by hand. Like, there's no
Mhm.
modern technology, there's no electricity, there's no, all of that. But here is this huge, pyramid, statue, whatever you want to call it, and it has blue and gold painted, around the head of it.
Yeah.
Aliens cannonballs, knock the nose off. Isn't that the whole big thing?
I'm not sure. I don't know a lot of the history of the Sphinx. All I know is that, it had color to it. Like, they painted the sand and it had blue color. I mean, these people with the pyramids, I mean, and how the maze was made, and how to get through them and all of that, and pulling these boulders up, these triangle, you know slanted, walls. So yeah, so I mean, just the technology, or not the technology, but the thought processes that just go into what you guys were talking about, and then the actual mummification, and then the actual building of the pyramids. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy to think about that. This is what they did in that time. You know.
And I know that they talk, to get a little bit off topic, but I know that they actually talk about that the Sphinx may be the oldest structure in all of Egypt, just the head of it. They
Yeah.
think that it was maybe a lion's head at first, and then that one of the pharaohs was the one who actually redesigned it into like the body of like the lion, and then the head of the Egyptian pharaoh. But originally, they say that the head is actually probably the oldest construction still existing in Egypt today.
Hmm.
And I think when we examine like all of these things, that like, the original purpose of what it was, and then, you have like from back in the 20s when they started excavating a lot of this stuff and like taking everything out and putting it on display. And I know a lot of Egypt at first was like, this is great, like, look at our culture. Like, I believe the king of Egypt actually gave Carter an award for, excavating all of this and like providing it so the world could see it and show how Egyptian culture was back in the day and how they were, the dominant ancient society in all of existence at that time, and that opened up this huge thing for, when what was the guy's name? It was the German guy who found Troy and brought back all of it was like Schmeller or something like that, but he found Troy and brought back all of the jewelry, and like his wife would wear all the jewelry that they found at these parties, and everybody would be like, "Wow, you found Troy." And people want these ancient things as like a centerpiece, and collectors pay tons and tons of money for these, ancient artifacts so they can privately display them. And for me, that was always a bad thing. Like, I take very much the Indiana Jones approach that it belongs in a museum so all can appreciate and all can enjoy. But then at the same time, I I I'm stuck at an impasse with that because I view it that everybody should be able to see these things and everybody should be able to view and understand the cultures that made us who we are today. However, I don't know how I would feel about, my great 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 grandmother's, remains being displayed in a museum, knowing that that's the family line I came from and that I would see it as being disrespectful because I know with a lot of the Native American things in the United States, we were now trying to repatriate a lot of the relics and the bones and the, culturally important items back to the tribes that they belong to. Because I mean, a lot of these items were just taken through, extremely terrible means and, almost stripping people of their culture. And to me, that's atrocious. And we should repatriate those items. And I know with Egypt now, a lot of people are trying to repatriate the things that were taken. But that has also opened up a huge market because I know ISIS was funding, their activities through stuff they took from museums in those regions and then
Mhm.
selling fakes as well and saying like, "Oh yeah, here's a fake, it's $1 million," and it was just a fake. But I mean, they were selling and destroying legitimate culturally significant items. And they're not the only one. Like, this has been happening for years. Like, I know Egypt just repatriated a couple skulls that were taken from the excavations around King Tut, like over like 70, 80 years ago.
think I think it boils down to like the person and the culture. Like if a group of people is okay with like, hey, yeah, like you can show like people around the world like our history and everything like that, and that's fine as long as it comes back to us at the end of the day. I don't really see an issue because I know for me, like if someone, I don't know, if people really liked to see like a dead relative of mine, I guess like honestly, like I wouldn't mind it that much. If someone stole like a dead relative of mine, I might have a little bit of issue with it. But if someone just wants, or like if a group of people just want to like appreciate and see and try to understand, I guess, like part of my lineage and like I guess my ancestors' way of life, I don't think I would have a huge issue with it. But I can understand why people would just want to be like, no, that is ours. You need to respect that. It just belongs to us, and we don't want like it to be like shown around. Like I can see it both ways, honestly.
In my thing, I am kind of with you. I can see it both ways. I don't know if there's, I think if the thought process is to try to be honorable and be, cautious of what is being handled, when it comes to research, and it's shown respect. I think it's to go and do it, and let's learn about ancient civilization, because if you think about it, it was the ignorance of our ancestors that made us not be able to know what our ancestors did.
Hmm.
If that makes sense. Like,
Yep.
because of, oh, we can't have this, so we got to burn this, or we got to destroy this, or whatever. And then obviously understanding that, a language and being able to, actually document certain things. Yes, with no preservation is hard too. So I think that to learn about culture and where you're from is great, but I think you also have to have that respect too of what are you actually holding in your hand, or what are you actually looking at, and that then I think takes a certain person with a certain type of passion, or a group of people with a certain type of passion, to know that, instead of just people going out there and being like, hey, I'm going to find this because I want to be famous, type sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, like, I'll take the whole thought process for Robert Ballard. He went out to go find the Titanic, and he did, and it's a great thing, wonderful. I'm not taking anything away from him, okay? But it's like, now if you look at it, it's like the great Robert Ballard. It's like, I mean, no offense, dude. Like, yeah, you caught the Titanic, but sooner or later somebody was going to find it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, like yep. This is so highly documented. Somebody's going to find this damn ship. Okay? Like, congratulations that you did. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. I don't know if this is making sense or not, but it's just like, if you're going out there for the fame and the fortune of it, I think that at some point you're going to lose the respect for what you're actually researching.
Yes. And I go ahead, Mark.
No, I was going to say, I always think about, like, back in those days when there wasn't a proper archaeological method for excavating things. Like, they excavated it, and they thoroughly excavated. But I mean, I always think of how much was lost, especially by, like, amateur excavators. Like, how much information did we lose? Like, they might have seen something as, oh, this is worthless because we're here for the money. And that is, like, the most important thing in that tomb. It like shed, like, it has writing on it, or it sheds insight on something we have never known how they did it. And some guy was just on this pot like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna write that we did a checklist here to make sure we got everything covered. Like, all right, seal this here using this, check. Do this here, check. Did we do this yet? No. Okay, we got to do that. And it, like, completely outlines the entire process. And he just saw this, like, tablet or pot and was like, "Yeah, screw this. We don't need this. It just has a bunch of gibberish on it." And just threw it and broke it. And it was like, that was what we needed, And
that's kind of like and going back to just modern culture or whatever. It's like there was a Simpsons episode, if I can talk about Simpsons. There was one where they realized that Jebediah Springfield is an actual fraud. And I'm sorry, I find this probably one of the funniest parts of the whole show, is that my name is not Jebediah Springfield, it's Hans Sprungfeld. So it's just kind of like the play off of, like, I think it's like Dr. Frankenstein, or I'm sorry, not Dr. Young Frankenstein, if you ever watched the movie. He's like, are you Dr. Frankenstein? No, Frankenstein. Gene Wilder says, he goes, you must be Igor or Igor. He goes, no, Igor. So I mean, just the play off of words. So with that, but no, it's like here, they want to dig up Springfield's bones or whatever, and right before they open it, Chief Wiggum's like, please forgive us for desecrating, or whatever he says, like, just whatever. And they open it up and they're like, oh, we don't find what it is. And they go back to Wiggum and he's just like, I guess we're done here. Isn't that right, Bonesy? And he picks up the skull and he starts, like, making like a puppet out of it. So, I'm sorry, but it's, yeah, I mean, like you're saying, like I said, I think there has to be a respect for it, because you got to realize what it, who it is, and or what it is, and and you're right, Mark. It's like, how many times do you think that we would have been able to find something if we looked at, and I can't specify any certain actual examples, but I get what you're saying. Like, if we could figure it out easier, then it's like, okay, maybe we wouldn't make these mistakes of destroying things without being, oh shit, we destroyed that.
Yeah, no, and that's, I think, one of the biggest cruxes with humans too, is that we have, especially back in the day, because when you look at, there were two places in this world that had beyond knowledge. There was Carthage, who had, the Library of Carthage, which had supposedly all of the world's known knowledge up until that date. And then there was also this library in China that had, not only all of like Chinese history, but had like world history. Like they sent envoys out to like gather information from everywhere that they could travel and bring it back, and important text, important knowledge. And Carthage obviously burned by the Romans um for, the information that they had, and the Romans got pissy about it because the Romans, had to be the best people in the world. So they burned Carthage, and then the Mongolians destroyed that library in China because Genghis Khan didn't want to have any part of Chinese history left wherever he went for anybody who disobeyed him. Like if you said no to him, he was like, kill everything, wipe out the entire culture because they said no, because he was, a megalomaniac when it came to his, ideal of himself. And I always think, what could we have found? Like maybe they literally could have had maps of like, oh, this is where all the Egyptians buried their mummies. We got it from Phil down the street one day. We just asked, and he's like, oh yeah, here's this map. It's got all of it, and that could have been in there, and that could have been. We could have all of that knowledge today and all of that information, and because of human hubris, we burned it all. So when we take the idea of mummies, and when you have like people profiteering for the ideal, like I don't Howard Carter, I don't believe he was out there to, turn a profit. I think there part of him was, but he wanted the recognition of it. And he did give the world, King Tut, and that became like the ideal of ancient society in Egypt. And quite honestly, it started a fire to understand archaeology as a whole. Like him finding King Tut drove people to start understanding and explaining our society, ancient and otherwise, through the physical remains of those who came before us. And for that, I think he did something incredible, because now people are, we have such a better understanding of who we once were. And that came because of King Tut. However, that also brought in that people are willing to pay for these ancient artifacts. So now we're going to send all these expeditions who don't care about the knowledge of it. They just want the artifact. And
Mhm.
then they just destroy anything that could have been really important, like those, like I keep bringing up that hypothetical, gibberish tablet that laid out an entire process of something we've always wondered, and just getting thrown to the side because it was like, oh hey, we don't need that. It's no one's gonna buy that. So they just threw it in a mudslide, and it just went down the mountain or wherever they were, and it's lost forever now because it wasn't perceived as having inherent value.
I 100% get that, and I wish there was some sort of protocol like that everyone would have gone by to preserve, or to like properly excavate all of these findings. But like thinking, I was just thinking in my head real quick, how and Mark and Dan, through your guys' research, I don't know if you found any like the answer to this, but how did like the Sphinx and everything, like how did that get lost? Like how did it take excavating in these certain areas and being like, oh, I found it? Like did someone like know, like, yeah, something's buried here, but like how did all that history get lost, I guess?
I mean, the desert eats things.
So like, yeah, and like that, was that the thing? Like did everyone that lived by that Sphinx just like move away and then it got buried? Is that what happened?
If we look at the historical aspect of it, I mean, people live there, people move, people, Rome invaded Egypt. Cleopatra and all that. We're all familiar with her. I mean, people move around. Like the Great Pyramids are always there. Like my mom worked with a woman who was from Egypt, and she lived near the Great Pyramids. And my mom was like, "What is it like waking up every day and seeing them?" Like, and she's like, It's literally nothing." She's like, "I woke up every day, and you just look out your window, and there they are."
Mhm.
And for her, it meant nothing. She was just like, "They're just big pyramids that are out in the desert." Like, and my mom was flabbergasted by that because my mom was like, "This is like the Great Pyramids." Like, everybody knows the Great Pyramids. We all in Western society see the Great Pyramids and be like one of the, you know, 7 wonders of the world. And
Mhm.
but for someone who
Mhm.
grew up there, it's just kinda like, "Oh, yeah, no, they're just there hanging out." And I always think about that too with, like, the Great Wall of China. Like, I see the Great Wall of China and I'm like, "This is fantastic." And then I just, but then you figure there's, some guy who just lives down the street from it and just looks at it every day, and he's like, "If that wall wasn't there, I could really see the mountains better."
So what it's saying, let's see. They're saying that just for the Sphinx is that you're right. The head was. It seems like the head was carved out of bedstone, um, and then like everything else was built under it. Like
Yeah.
then it was so like it originally was just a head, um, for that, and then for the nose. I'll just read it. Examination of the Sphinx face shows that long rods or chisels were hammered into the nose area, one down from the bridge and another beneath the nostril, then used to pry the nose off towards the south, resulting in 1 meter wide nose still being lost to date. It seems that like people actually went up and like desecrated it. Drawings of the Sphinx in 1773 show the nose missing. Many folks' tales exist regarding the destruction of its nose, aiming to provide an answer as where it went to what happened. One tale erroneously attributes it to cannonballs fired by an army of Napoleon from the Napoleon Bonaparte. Other tales are being works of Mamluks.
Mamalukes.
No, Mamluk.
Yeah,
Ma,
Mamluk, yeah.
yeah, Mamluk.
Those were, like, cavalry in, ancient
Yeah,
warriors. Yeah.
yep. Since the 10th century, some Arab authors have claimed to be the result of iconoclastic attacks. Or, I'm sorry, iconocalics. Calic? I'm really horrible with words. So,
You're
uh,
Iconoclastic?
doing your best.
yeah, I'm trying my best.
Iconoclastic?
Let's see. In addition to the lost nose, a ceremonial pharaoh beard, also that thought it had been attached, and that's gone too. So like the beard wrap,
Mm,
they thought was on there too. That's gone.
interesting.
So yep. Oh, and residuals of red pigment are visible in the Sphinx face, and traces of yellow and blue pigment are also found elsewhere in the Sphinx, leading that it was once decked out in gaudy comic book colors. That's just somebody's opinion, but that was from our Mark Lenner. Is I guess a research on it, but no, like I said, it did have colors. It shows that there's pigment, so it at some point it was painted.
I think that's so cool.
Yep.
Man, this is what I love about the mummy conversation though, is because the mummy opens the door to all of this. And that I think goes back to what I was saying about finding King Tut is that, once they found King Tut, this opened the door to everything we know now. Because I mean, there was excavations happening, but I mean King Tut was like that gold sarcophagus everybody lost their minds about. Like,
Hmm.
it was so unfathomable that they made that,
Hmm.
and they were like, "This is incredible. We need to search this more. We need to study it more. We need to be able to, decipher every hieroglyphic we see and understand ancient Egyptian way of life." And that opened that door to just this mountainous amount of study and mountainous amount of application of learning about just our entire past. And I think that was King Tut, who was a mummy, his greatest contribution to, I think, history to this day. I mean, as a pharaoh, he may not have been much to write home about, but through his death, he gave us such an understanding of everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. there's there's something I want to bring up. So like most of the research that I did was like a lot about the myths behind mummies, and there's two in particular that I want to bring up. I'm not going to bring up the Curse of King Tut because everyone knows that. But there's two that I had never heard of. First one, thanks for reminding me, Dan, was the Titanic was sunk because of a mummy. Have you guys heard of this?
Yes, I have heard that because it
I've
almost hit
heard
the
that
ship.
one. There was a mummy in the basement of it, or basement, like the bellows of it.
I heard that when the Titanic was pulling out, it almost hit the ship carrying King Tut's mummy, and it like knocked it off the pedestal or something, and that cursed the entire Titanic.
So
Was it King Tut's mummy?
So here's the thing: is that it was not. It was Princess of Amen Ra. That was the mummy that was supposedly on the Titanic. However, the Titanic, with its records and everything, never showed that there was a mummy on board the Titanic in like the cargo bays and everything like that. Apparently, they found like a list of all the cargo that was in the Titanic. Nothing says a mummy was there. Um, but there was four guys that purchased, four Englishmen, I believe, that purchased the Princess of Amen Ra, like the coffin with the mummy inside. And no shit, what happened was the very next day, one of them walked out into the desert and never returned. So that happened. That's true. The second day, the second guy, one of the Englishmen, was shot in the arm, and his arm had to be amputated because it was so bad. And then I think it was the third guy had all of his savings that he had in his bank all somehow disappeared. So the guy had no money. And then the fourth guy lost his job coming back and had to sell matches on the street for the rest of his life. So there was no actual mummy on the Titanic, but the people that had purchased the mummy did have some shitty things happen to them. So I found that to be
Interesting.
pretty interesting.
Don't buy mummies is basically the moral of that story.
Yeah, I don't know why
Well-
you would.
Like, what do you do? Like, I'm gonna buy a mummy. I'm just gonna leave it in my living room in a case, and when people come over and be like, "Hey, look at this dead guy. I bought him for 10 grand. Look at him. It's a mummy."
Didn't
Let's
Marilyn
go.
Manson have a mummy in his building in his house or something?
Oh, it wouldn't put it past me if he did.
Yeah, supposedly he's got a mummified like child or something.
Oh, jeez.
Like,
Yeah.
what do you do with that? Like, is it a talking piece? Like, hey, look at this dead kid. I bought it.
I mean,
Yeah.
it fits his personality.
Yeah. Well, with the charges that supposedly are going against him and all of
Yeah,
that, but
yeah.
I'm not putting it past him.
The second myth that again, I don't know if you guys have heard of this one, is at the Manchester Museum, the statue of a mummy. Have you heard about this?
No.
Oh.
So every 3 days, apparently this statue of a mummy. Now it's not like of like a mummy, but it's like of a pharaoh. Every 3 days, this mummy statue rotates 180 degrees. And it was verified on camera that this is like a time lapse camera that this is actually happening, but it happens like very slightly. Um, Supposedly, like the myth behind it is that if the mummy was ever destroyed, its spirit would go into the statue that was made of it. And I think that's actually what had happened. If I remember the reading, was that the mummy like disappeared, and everyone thinks it was destroyed, and that's why this statue is moving. It turns out that the two surfaces of what the statue was sitting on, and like I don't know, I guess it was at such a slight angle that it was turning the statue to make it look like as if it was rotating. So I thought that was really interesting.
What is it called? What?
It was the Manchester Museum. I can't remember what the statue's called, but I'm sure if you look up Manchester Museum statue mummy turning or whatever, I'm sure you can find it and read about it. But I thought that was really interesting. Those are two stories that I had never heard. So
I think that's
I'm watching it right now. It's a time
okay.
lapse. It's like 42 seconds.
But I
Oh my
think that
god!
is it moving?
Yeah, it's moving. Here,
That's
I'll put it into our Discord.
I think that brings up a really interesting thing, though, is that people back in the day, they would, if you saw that, and it's something so simple. It's just like surface tension and angles. It's basic geometry and basic, physics. But if I was like in the 1700s and I couldn't read and I was just Joe Schmo, if I saw that happening, I'd be like, "Well, it's cursed. We gotta destroy it. It's cursed. What if you destroyed it? It curses you. Oh, we can't touch it. It's just this haunted statue that moves on its own. This is insane. Look at that."
and then that brings up the question again, like people destroying stuff without knowing what they're actually destroying. Oh my gosh, it is turning. I never watched the video.
It's literally
crazy.
turning.
And there's a scientific thing, and I could see somebody going over and say, "This is the devil," and smashing it.
Right? Like,
You know what's really weird is that none of the other statues are moving.
True.
no, because this one's cursed. It's insane. Like I watched it and I'm like, it's literally moving. Like you can see it moving. And I love that they explained it scientifically. Like, no, it's not haunted. It's just, surface tension and, the material and the angle. It's completely logical while it's moving, but let's scare the shit out of people too.
It's like the Roswell weather balloons. And they were weather balloons. They weren't aliens. Okay.
Whoa.
Damn science.
Pump your brakes
Have to
there.
ruin everything.
Pump your brakes there. We haven't confirmed that it was a weather balloon yet. But but yeah, like Dan just said, this literally is like it's the devil, destroy it. We gotta destroy it. And it's like, no, it's not the devil. It's surface tension. Like and how much was lost to that? Like, because people's go-to move back then was gotta break it.
Gotta break it.
Don't know what it is, gotta break it. Don't you want to understand it? That guy's a witch, burn him. That was the
I think you're
go-to.
wrong. She's a witch.
Because I could read? Yes.
Yes.
Witch. They're witch.
And we're laughing at that, but I mean that did happen, which is
that's the sad thing.
Which, depending on how this comes out, we actually interviewed a witch. What did he consider himself, a witch or a warlock?
He calls himself a sorcerer.
Or sorcerer. Okay.
Yes.
So, which
Carlos
an amazing. So, after this episode, if you're listening, go check out that other episode if you haven't. So,
yes.
Yeah. So it's so we make fun, but we only make fun in a humorous, non mean way. So,
for the comedic sense of things.
Correct.
Yes.
But yeah, check that out. Check that episode out also too, which was really good. We had a lot of fun with him.
Yes, really insightful on the workings of sorcery that I did not know about as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah, I think that wraps it up for everything to do with mummies. I think we had a great discussion. I hope all of our listeners, I learned something new. I think every time we do this, I learn something new about whatever subject that we're covering, which I love. That's my take on mummies. I think they're awesome. I think it's crazy how they're all over the world. Pretty much every culture has their own version of kind of how they did it. That's my take on it.
No, I am a big fan of mummies. Not only for the cultural significance that it gives to everything, the fact that we can view kind of a window of who we once were and what others may have believed is something that we should always strive to preserve as long as we preserve it respectfully.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I find it fascinating the care that it went into, the thought processes and the care that our ancestors or ancestors of people took to do this, and the fact that it's survived for so long, and that we're still talking about it. I think that's a really cool thing, and I think Mummies just kind of, once again, it furthers just the, who we were as society. I love the societal trends that change, and it's, who the ancient Egyptians were as their society, and this is what they felt was important, and I just find that fascinating.
Mark, do you want to let everyone know what they can find us on?
So for everybody who's looking to find us, you can find us on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, iHeartRadio, Amazon as well. We're on all the major platforms. If you ever want to just check us out, we're also on YouTube, where we kind of post sometimes video of ourselves. This week, a lot of us had a rough week, so we don't want to scare you with our look. We just prefer to scare you with our content. So um, you can check us out on all of those. Also, feel free to join our Discord. We will post a link on iTunes for the not on iTunes, on YouTube for the Discord itself. So if you want to check us out on Discord, feel free to click on the link. We'll also love to talk with you all and hear what you want us to hear covered. Or if you have any new insights for us that we may not have known about, definitely let us know, and we will recover the topics with the new information. Possibly, if one of you want to get on the show, we'll talk with you. Maybe even have you on as a guest host one week. We're all about just expanding our knowledge of the unknown and sometimes the known, as we're covering today. Um, just to really kind of get that out there for everybody. We want to hear what you have to say. We want to bring all of this to everyone because it's not only a part of who we are, but it's a big part of where we came from.
Great. That's great. I love it. Mark, I couldn't have put it better.
Well, thank you. I try.
All right. This is the Abby Normals. End of transmission.